A big change that was happening in the 18th century was the diffusion of horses and weapons throughout the plains area of North America. This radically changed the power structure. So a number of tribes were moving west as a result of, and south as a result of changes in the landscape, changes in the political situation. And these folks that got access to horses and guns first from the Europeans were able to develop a trading regime that was much more powerful than their neighbors. So there were certain dominant tribes in each area. So the Blackfeet became dominant pretty quick, and they got weapons from French traders that traded through the Cree and Assiniboine here. Another of the powerful tribes were the Osage. They were a Sioux-speaking grouping, and they dominated a lot of the central plains, what's now Kansas, Oklahoma area. And the Comanche, they were probably the most powerful empire of the plains. They controlled a good half or more of what's now Texas. And they developed, as a result of gaining horses and guns, a type of raiding culture to get the goods they needed. So they would raid the various Spanish settlements such as Santa Fe or San Antonio and just take more horses, take trade goods, and then go sell them elsewhere. And that actually became such an important part of their culture. It became highly connected to their ideas of masculinity and so forth. So they tended to fight with the Apache, who also developed a raiding culture, and the Comanche and Apache would fight over this territory in New Mexico here. The Comanche generally pushed the Apache westward, more towards Arizona. You saw these groupings become more powerful as a result of European contact, even though actual European contact with most of the plains people was relatively limited. There were a few French traders who got out into these regions, but not very many. Back in the East, natives were still powerful enough in the 18th century to have to be dealt with like nations by the colonists, especially at first. And in a lot of cases, the diplomacy was intended to be fair. So a good example is William Penn, who was the founder of what became Pennsylvania. He, as a Quaker, had these religious ideas which taught him that everybody should be treated with respect, and that included natives. And so he worked in good faith with a lot of natives, try to work out fair treaties with them, purchase goods from them fairly. But over time, similar to the film you saw last time where the Pilgrims stopped needing the natives, and so they weren't as interested in working with them after second and third generations came of age. Same kind of thing happened in Pennsylvania. So William Penn, who established Pennsylvania in the late 17th century, intended to work well with the natives and did during the first generation of settlement in Pennsylvania. But as the second, third, fourth generations of settlement established themselves, you started to see more unfair treaties. One of the more unfair ones was something called the Walking Purchase in 1737. And the premise behind this was that the colonists told the Delaware natives that they had made a treaty with their parents and grandparents that said, in the future, we will be able to purchase as much land from you if we want to, as far as a man can walk in a day and a half. The Delaware disputed that this treaty ever existed, but the English colonists said it did, and they basically got their best marathon runners, set them up to go as far as they could. One of them almost died in the effort. In about 36 hours, he ran about 60 miles. As a result, the Pennsylvania colonists were able to acquire about 1,200 square miles of what became eastern Pennsylvania. And this is just one example, one of the more notorious ones, but an example of the kind of cheating that would take place in diplomacy with the natives when it was intended to be fair when the colonies started, but it became increasingly unfair. Future treaties wouldn't be quite as blatant with the with the walkers or runners, but they would often feature additional clauses that didn't appear in the original agreements, things like that, that would just result in thousands of more acres acquired, and the natives would have little recourse. The Delaware tried to go complain, but the colonists didn't listen, and then they went to the Iroquois, and the Iroquois sided with the English in this case, since they actually wanted to absorb the Delaware as a subordinate tribe. Americans often, and British and American colonists often knew what these political rivalries were as well, and were often willing to exploit them. So by the mid part of the 18th century, the attempts at balance between the European empires in North America and trying to play one another off each other, both ends against the middle, that was working pretty well until the 1750s, when things were starting to break down. Between the 1750s and the 1820s, all the European empires would just fall completely apart. Not everywhere, but in North America, South America as well. And the result for natives was that they no longer had that leverage that they could use to take focus off of their lands. These frontier areas that the natives were very good at pitting the empires against each other to take attention off of them. In the next period, we're going to talk about 1750s through 1820s. That leverage all went away, and that was generally very bad for natives.